Usually, when we come back to our place, we continue to say Namo Amitofo. We say it faster and faster, and we sit down while we're still chanting it. And then, after a while, the chant leader rings the bell, and then we have the silence then, and we can go into our own meditation. I really like this practice of doing something together as a group and everybody chanting together, and you hear everybody's voices together. And when you hear everybody's voices together, you get a feeling of people all going in the same direction. So instead of counter purposes, I want this, no, I want that, we're all going together because we all see that this state of samsara, this state of being reborn again and again under the influence of afflictions and karma, is something that we want to get out of, and that we have the incredible potential to generate the wisdom that will get us out of this state, and to generate the compassion and bodhicitta, or altruistic intention, that will help us think of taking everybody out of this state. Yeah. So it can be very, very rich, how you think of the practice while you're doing it.
Weber, good afternoon. There's a question. So should we actually recite Amitofo or Amitofo? Because sometimes it says that it doesn't matter, but according to what I know or what I've listened to past teachers, R is more like the correct pronunciation, because R is the first sound, so we can call Amitofo, Allah, Amen. So most of the regions start with the R. Mm-hmm. But in some contexts, people will say Amitofo. Mm-hmm. So is it good to practice Amitofo as a foundation, or for people who have been reciting Amitofo for a long time, it's not good to correct them? Yeah, thank you.
It depends who it is. If it's somebody that's been doing Amitofo for 60 years, let him be. Yeah, but as it's written, Amitofo, try to do Amitofo. Yeah. Okay, so there's another question here. So what are the benefits of making light offerings? Well, light in Buddhism, and I think in many traditions, light symbolizes wisdom. Okay, so when we offer light, we're thinking about wisdom and gaining wisdom. So there's there's many kinds of wisdom, but two basic ones: the wisdom of conventional truths and the wisdom of ultimate truths. So the wisdom of conventional truths understands how things arise dependent on other factors. Yeah, things that change arise due to causes and conditions, and really understands that dependent arising in depth. When you do, it really it softens your mind, because right now we see things as isolated kind of things that have their own nature and are self-created or self-instituted, and that's not actually what things are. So the wisdom of conventional truths understands impermanence, understands karma, how things arise due to causes and conditions, and so on. Then the wisdom of the ultimate truth understands how things actually exist. Yeah, because the way things appear to us conventionally is false, but we need to really understand how they actually exist. So, for example, when we see something, it seems like it has its own essence. Here's this thermos. It is a thermos, right? It's not a giraffe. It's not a turtle. Okay, it's a thermos. But when we dissect the thermos and take it apart, if we could do this, and then this isn't such a good object, I can't take it apart so well. But when we look in all the parts of the thermos, we can't find what a thermos is. Okay? When we look at, if we take the clock, yeah, I won't take the clock apart. But if you can imagine taking it apart, yeah, and putting all the pieces out here, where is the clock? Yeah, when you separate the pieces, do you have a clock anywhere? No. When you put the pieces together, you have a clock. Now, wait a minute, how does that work? Because the way it appears is as if this has the essence of being a clock. You know, any person who comes into this room knows it's a clock because it has that essence. Yeah. But when we take it apart, we can't find what the essence of clock is, and we can't even find the clock. So what that's indicating is that how this thing appears to our senses as one completely solid, integrated thing is a false appearance. Yeah. Okay. There's just a bunch of parts. Now, what makes the parts into a clock? Do we just put all the parts in a heap and we say that's a clock? No. Okay. If we put all the parts together in a certain arrangement, does that make it a clock? No. Okay. What makes it a clock is when all of us together, more or less, yeah, we all can see that this functions as something to tell the time, that it's, we've put together the parts, it performs that function of telling the time, and because of that, we impute the name clock. Okay, we impute the name clock, but when we dissect it and look for the clock, there's no clock. So the non-finding of what we thought was a real clock, yeah, that emptiness of a real solid, permanent, inherently existent clock is a false appearance. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that there's no clock and that everything is just a hallucination. It means, yeah, that when you put parts together and everybody gives it a name and we all see it as having a similar function, then it becomes a clock. Okay, so we say that things exist by being dependent, by being designated in dependence on the collection of its parts. Okay, but it's not just putting the parts together and us calling it a clock. Okay, it exists in relationship to other things. If there were no human beings who needed to know the time, this would not be a clock. It would just be some object that we kick along the roadside. Because if there were no human beings, there's nobody looking at it. But if there are human beings, but we didn't have the concept of time and we didn't need something to measure the time, then this could not perform that function of measuring time. So we wouldn't call it a clock. When you start looking at things and see how they are dependent on causes and conditions, how they're dependent on parts, and the role our mind plays in putting those parts together and seeing them as an object and imputing a name, then we begin to see how things are related and how our minds in so many ways are creating our reality. Yeah. And one thing that got me thinking along this way is people are always very concerned about the economy, right? Yeah, Singapore, everywhere in the world. The economy, is it going up? Is it going down? Do I sell stock? Do I buy bonds? What do I do? Do I get a CD? What's the interest rate? Yeah, we're so preoccupied with the economy. Okay. Where did the economy come from? It came from people. It came, our minds made up this economy. Yeah, our minds created stocks and bonds and CDs and interest rates. Yeah. We invented this system of the economy. But we forgot that, and we look at the economy as if it's out there and it has its own inherent rules as to how it functions. Yeah, and these are the rules, and they don't change, and so we just have to learn to manipulate them, or to manipulate, our money through all these rules. But we're the ones who created it. Yeah. When there's a war, who created the war? Does the war exist out there independent of every other phenomena? No, wars only happen because there's human beings. And human beings who disagree, and human beings who don't see the disadvantage of violence. Yeah. So I'm saying this because so often we're in situations and we feel like the situation is something really concrete and pressing in on us. In Singapore, you have to take your exams, and your exam in kindergarten is going to influence what elementary school you go to. I mean, you're this big, and you go to kindergarten that day and you don't feel well, but so you don't do well on the test, and the whole rest of your life is, now you're steered through a certain quality of schools. Who invented all of that? Who? Yeah.
Ministry of Education.
Yeah. But the Ministry of Education is a bunch of people. Can you find one person who did it? And anyway, even if they created that, we all bought along with it. Yeah. But I look at that system and, directing a child, and where they're going to go to school for the next 20 years, according to a test they take when they're 5 or 6 years old. In my mind, that's kind of dumb. Yeah, because many children are what we call late bloomers. Yeah, they develop their potential a little bit later. And if they're already channeled into a system, they don't have the chance to use that. Yeah. So, my point in all of this is that how we see things is in a very solid way, but we're the ones who, in many cases, created them. Yeah. So, they can actually be quite malleable. And if the system can't change because people's minds are too, frozen, then at least we can change our minds as to how we look at the systems and relate to the systems. Because we realize, for example, that one test is not indicative of your potential as a human being, is it? Yeah. Even 10 tests is indicative of your potential as a human being. So we shouldn't get too caught up in these kind of categories. Okay? And yet, things do exist and they function, and it's good to know how things function so that we can navigate the world. Okay? So that all started off from asking me about light offerings, but light offerings indicate the wisdom, knowing conventional truths, knowing ultimate truths. Yeah. So when we offer them, offer light, we're bringing the light of wisdom into our hearts. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Venerable, for taking my question. You were speaking earlier about the Sangha, the folks who are nuns and monks representative merely of the Sangha, and the Sangha being the four. And I wondered, what is it about four and not 3 or 5 that needs to be the minimum number?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about the conventional Sangha, the communities of monks and nuns, the Buddha outlined different things that we have to do as a community. Yeah, like give ordination every 2 weeks or so, to do confession and restoration of our precepts. He set out a rainy season retreat that we do and a ceremony at the end of it. And so there's different things that he set out for the Sangha to do. And in doing that, he set out different numbers of people that have to be present in order for that particular ceremony or function to have the stamp of approval that it was done properly, and not just ad hoc people getting together who don't know what they're doing, making some decision. Okay? So, for example, in giving ordination, you have to have a preceptor. This is the novice ordination. You have to have the preceptor, and then at least 4 fully ordained monks or 4 fully ordained nuns. Yeah? So 4 sounded like a good number. Yeah. If it's 3, it's not so many. If it's 200, how are you going to get that many people together? So he said 4 sounds good.
Thank you, Venerable.
Venerable, this morning you mentioned that we shouldn't look at Amitabha as coming from heaven or what and rescue us. But in the sadhana, the prayer for the time of death, it mentions to visualize at the time of death, Amitabha comes and advises us. So what is the difference between these two?
Okay, so let's look at that part. Are you talking about the, yeah, well, the first line says, at the moment the messenger of death arrives, please come instantaneously from your pristine realm. Advise me to give up grasping at mundane existence and invite me to come to your pristine realm. So it sounds like this when you say the words, yeah. It's written in words, it's, really deep spiritual truth and so on. You can't express very well. There aren't the words for them. So they're often put in ordinary words, and then we're supposed to see the relationship between the ordinary words and the actual meaning. So if you take this literally, it sounds like you're dying and there's a messenger of death who comes and goes, hello, good morning, you're going to die today. Yeah. And then Amitabha, who's next to Superman in the sky, goes, wait a minute, I'm coming to your rescue, and zips down and advises us to give up grasping at mundane existence. Yeah, and he not only gives us that, but he invites us. We have a nice written invitation with our name on it that says, please come to my realm. We're having a great party and you're invited. Okay, it sounds like that. Yeah. Do you think that's what's happening? I don't think so. Okay. The messenger of death, it's not a person, it's not something external. I think when people are dying, they can feel their body losing energy. They can feel their mind becoming less clear or less active, less conceptual. Okay? So just that experience, I think, is what is meant by the messenger of death. Okay? So likewise, we're talking like, okay, Amitabha, I'm dying. It's up to you to come and invite me. So please show up because I want to go to your pure realm and I don't know how to get there by myself. I don't know. Do I turn right at the first cloud and left at the second cloud? Okay, no, it's not like that. So what does it mean Amitabha comes from his pristine realm? It means that during our life, we have been thinking about Amitabha. We've been thinking about the teachings, the Dharma that he's given. We've been practicing them and trying to transform our mind. For example, trying this technique I use I explain for when we're sick. Yeah, seeing it as just the ripening of our karma, so it's no big deal, and we're burning that karma, so this is good. Yeah. So, what's really going to count at the time we die is, have we practiced these teachings and familiarized our mind with them and succeeded in transforming our mind? Yeah. So it's not that Amitabha comes, It's really meaning, this verse, oh, may I remember my Dharma practice. May I remember, the correct view of reality. May I generate loving kindness and compassion for all living beings. Because it's those thoughts and that transformation that is actually the thing that will result in a rebirth, in Sukhavati. Okay?
Venerable, the question is follow up from his question. For people who think when they are dying, they'll become nothing and they're very fearful. Is it appropriate to share with them the scenario you said about Amitabha coming to bring them to
Okay,
a better place. Or
so is somebody who is not a Buddhist, they've never heard of Amitabha before?
they do, but they just like draw stick praying in their lifetime. So this scenario actually appeals to them, like somebody they have confidence in
I
will
think, yeah,
fetch them when they're dying.
no. No, I don't think they're going to have the image of somebody coming to pick them up in, in a Rolls Royce when they're dying and take them to the Pure Land. Okay. It's when there are people who are know nothing about Buddhism, or even they know something about Buddhism, but they've never really practiced, so they don't understand it very well. Then what I would do is I would talk to them and remind them of all the virtuous actions they've done while they were alive. Remind them of the people that they've helped. Remind them of their kind heart. Yeah, remind them of their goodness and their wisdom. In other words, help them as they're separating from this body and this life to remember that there's something good, and then to dedicate so that they are reborn in a way where they can continue to do this practice and continue to develop and follow the Buddhist teachings. Yeah. So you reminded them of that, and that directs their mind in that way, and that can help them when they die. Okay.
The other question I have is when we are doing the walking, when we are chanting, there's a thought that came to my mind that, oh, this is like the Pure Land, like what they would do if they're in the Pure Land.
Mhm.
And then I thought that, is that what we are supposed to practice in daily life, rather than like until we die, then we think what is it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that what we are supposed to practice?
Yeah, I think it's quite good, and I think I mentioned it in the morning. Try to see this as a Pure Land. Yeah. In the sense that you're in a Pure Land, you're not gonna, there's nothing to complain about. So every time you start to complain, you have to go, oh, I got to think differently. I'm not in, I'm in a Pure Land. There's nothing here to complain about. My mind can be satisfied with whatever I have, Or if your mind starts going and criticizing other people, in Pure Land, there's nobody to criticize. Everybody is kind, everybody's honest. Yeah. So I better stop seeing kind and honest people as mean and negative. Yeah. So holding something that's called pure view, yeah, it can be very helpful for our mind and help us break the habits of always seeing the bad side, always thinking the worst thing is going to happen, stuff like that. Okay, so it's training the mind. Yeah, the whole path is about training our mind. Yeah, and so the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas teach us, they inspire us, they help us, but they can't zoom down like Superman and grab us. Okay.
Venerable, so for someone who practices Pure Land, what happens when the person gets dementia and as the illness progresses, you will get to a point where you can't even talk and you're not communicative.
Yeah.
So at the point of that person's death, how can that person continue to be mindful of the Pure Land? And how can people around the person help the person in the moments of death?
Okay. I think it's similar by reminding that person of how they practice. They may have dementia now, but you remind them of how they practice. You remind them of their goodness. Because the thing is, during our lives, depending upon what we think and feel and how we look at things, we're planting seeds or latencies in our mind. Yeah. So if during your life you've planted, let's say, a lot of seeds of, forgiveness, a lot of seeds of seeing other people with love and compassion and wishing them the best, then even if you have dementia, yeah, you may remember those because of the force of so many seeds, yeah, in your mind. You may remember that. Or if somebody reminds you, that may help you to remember. Yeah. Our mind is something that's hard to understand. There's so many factors influencing it at different levels of minds, because there's different levels of minds, subtle and gross, and all these seeds and latencies, just depending on our actions and our thoughts and what we've trained our mind in. So it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. Okay, but in general, yeah, encourage people to think in a positive way. Not think, oh, think about the Pure Land because when you go there you'll be a millionaire. No, yeah, that's not what you want to encourage in somebody's mind.
Hi, Venerable. I have a bit of a confused question. I understand the aspiration of everyone wanting to go to Amitabha Land, but there is also the other aspect where in this planet that we inhabit, opening the news feed every day is kind of a traumatic event. We have mad leaders, everything getting chaotic. So, and you mentioned Amitabha and Nagarjuna all in Pure Land, and if we refine our practices so that we all get to go there, who's going to remain here to help us with this chaos?
This is a very good question. Yeah. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that people who want to go to the Pure Land just because it's nice and easy, they don't have the proper motivation. Yeah. And it would be much better for them to really focus on developing genuine love and compassion and benefiting sentient beings now. Okay. Also, bodhisattvas, or people who want to go to the Pure Land, the purpose is that it's a good place to practice. And if you can practice well there, then you get enlightened more quickly. And if you're enlightened more quickly, then you can manifest all the enlightening activities that are of benefit to everybody. Yeah, so even people aspire to go to Amitabha's Pure Land, it doesn't mean they're going to succeed in going. Okay. Yeah, it's not just a question of saying Namo Amitofo 10 times and then that's it. Okay. Yeah. And some people who see the advantages of practicing Tantra, it's just another Buddhist practice, they prefer to stay, here in their next rebirth and to continue to practice that here instead of going to a Pure Land. Okay, does that make some sense to you? Yeah.
Hi, Venerable Children. I would like to hear what's your opinion on streamlining, because I attended a talk by Ajahn Brahm, and he mentioned about this concept of going into this stream which is towards Nibbana. So I wonder, how does that relate with the Pure Land, and if you could share a bit more. Thank you.
Okay. So in Theravada, when they talk about entering the stream, they're talking about having your initial realization of the ultimate nature, okay, and becoming what's called a stream enterer, yeah. And so that's quite a realization. And when you have that, you're definitely going to be going towards liberation. Yeah, so that's called entering the stream. How does that relate to Pure Land practice? I think, if you're reborn in a Pure Land, you don't necessarily have a specific realization, but you're born in an environment that's going to be very conducive for your practice. So it's easy to purify, easy to create virtue, much easier to gain realizations. Okay, but stream enter is a specific level for people following the path to arhatship. Bodhisattvas are following the path to Buddhahood. So it's a slightly different demarcation of the different levels of attainment. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, Venerable. I have a doubt about my personal practice, and it might be kind of silly, but I want to eliminate all doubt. I think I know the answer. So when I am visualizing my offerings, and we want to offer the best of everything and the things that are most important to you, I occasionally offer my cats and my friends and my dad because they're the most important things to me, right?
Yeah.
But they're not pure things. They're not perfect things. Am I really meant to be offering these?
You can imagine them in a pure form and offer them.
I like that.
Okay. And in the inner offering, the words of the inner offering, we say, I think that verse is in
I know
here.
it says I offer my body, and that's not
the
clear.
objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers. This is the top of page 2.
I
My
offer
body,
these.
wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me and others to be free from the 3 poisonous attitudes. 3 poisonous attitudes are ignorance, anger, and attachment. Okay, so offer my friends. Well, yeah, I don't really want to offer my friends to the Buddha. I want to keep them for myself. Offer my enemies? You bet, Buddha, you take them. I've had it. Strangers? Yeah, I can offer them. That's okay too. My body? No, that one's mine. My wealth? Mm-mm. My enjoyments? Mm-mm. Okay. So, what this verse is doing is getting us, and as you mentioned, many of those things that we're very attached to are impure things. Yeah, I want to offer my body. Really? What's inside your body? Yeah, you think your body's pure inside? You strip away the skin. What is it? Ugh. Yeah, you see this beautiful person. You want to hug them. But if the skin were taken away, then what? Okay? So we're offered, some of the things that we grasp at and cling to, we don't really see in a very accurate way. So this verse is helping us to give those things up, and by seeing them in a purer form or seeing them in a more accurate form. When you think about it, well, okay, I don't really want to give my friends to the Buddha, then the Buddha will have them, I won't have them. It's not like that. It's not about the Buddha comes and says, okay, you gave me your friends, pay up. Give them to me, I'm taking them. No, it's mentally, yeah. wouldn't your friends and the people you care about be in better shape if they were under the guidance of the Buddha rather than under the guidance of your misconceptions? Yeah. So we give up our friends because we wish them the best. Yeah. Enemies. Yeah. It's not just to get rid of them. But remember, our mind is the one who makes them into enemies. And if that person does have some problems, with controlling their temper or controlling their arrogance or whatever, in this verse, when we offer them to the Buddha, we're really doing so with the thought of, may the Buddha teach them how to let go of all these worldly things that are never going to bring them ultimate happiness. Yeah. And so that would really change your quote, quote, enemies and make them into very different people than you know now. Okay. Your wealth, okay, doesn't mean you say this verse, you go to the bank, you close down all your bank accounts, and then you go looking for the Buddha so that you can give him all your money. Yeah, no. What it means is mentally, okay, we give away these things, and it indicates giving away our clinging attachment to them, because that's the chief thing that really hinders us in our practice, is clinging. Yeah. So we imagine giving them to the Buddha, but we can still use them. But they belong to the Buddha, and we're using them. If we're using, because we gave them to the Buddha, so now they belong to the Buddha. If I'm using something that belongs to the Buddha, how should I use it? Just any old way to satisfy my fickleness and my petty desires? Or if I'm using money, should I use it to be a benefit to sentient beings? Okay. If you mentally give your car to the Buddha, it's still in, at your house. But now when you use it, you think, oh, this is the Buddha's car. So the Buddha cares about the planet. So the Buddha, because he cares about sentient beings, he cares about our environment. So he cares about climate change. So if I'm using the Buddha's car, yeah, if the Buddha was here, would he just get in his car and go here and go there and drive around, just for the pleasure of driving? No. Yeah, because that would put unnecessary pollution into the world. So that means if I'm using the Buddha's car, then I'm only going to drive when I need to. And I'm not going to drive, oh, I feel like going out and getting this, I'd run out and get that. Oh, I want to get this and run out and get that. And driving around just for the heck of driving around. No, I have to be more careful with how I use these things. Okay? So it's a very interesting practice to start thinking of things. If you offer a person to the Buddha and it's somebody that you don't get along with so well, but now, you've mentally offered them to the Buddha, so this is somebody that the Buddha cares about. Yeah, are you going to be rude and nasty to somebody that the Buddha cares about? I hope not. Okay, so this way of thinking is a way of directing our mind to think in a more positive way. Is Amitabha's Pure Land a realm? If yes, which realm is it? It's not one of the samsaric realms. Okay, so you can't locate it in the desire realm, formless realms. It's not one of those. Okay, it's a pure land created by Amitabha's very sincere aspirations and by his merit, for the benefit of sentient beings who have the karma to benefit from rebirth there.
I wanted to ask regarding the line sentient beings have happiness and its causes. What about the conditions? Because everything has cause and condition, right?
Yeah.
So could you explain a little bit about the cause of happiness and the conditions of happiness?
Okay.
And
Good question.
can I also ask the other thing about the 17th prayer says, I reveal and confess every destruction action I've done since beginningless time. But that's I wouldn't know what bad things I've done since, but it's very long. It's
Yeah. Yeah. it's
so
very
so
long.
the question is it
Okay,
is
let's
it
do one question at a time, okay? Yeah. So your first question was?
conditions of happiness?
Okay, so the causes and conditions of happiness. Okay, the causes, when we're talking about the principal causes, that is going to be karma, okay? So if, for example, Nagarjuna said that generosity is the cause of wealth, and ethical conduct is the cause of a good rebirth. Okay, so if we want a good rebirth, we should practice ethical conduct. That's the chief cause. If we want to be wealthy, yeah, then we should practice generosity because that's the principal cause. Yeah. Now, of course, there's different kinds of wealth. There's material wealth. Some people may want that, so they give material things. But there's also spiritual wealth. Okay, having teachers and time to practice and a space to practice and Dharma friends and texts and so on. Okay, so different kinds of wealth. And so we want to create, especially, because we want to continue Dharma practice in future lives, we want to create the causes for that kind of wealth to be in our life. Okay. What's interesting is we can't just create the causes for wealth without, if we create the causes for wealth, but we don't create the causes for a good rebirth through ethical conduct, then you may wind up as one of the cats at our abbey. Yeah. Or one of the moose at the abbey. Yeah. Or one of the bears or the cougars, or, we have all sorts of living beings there. So the wealth will give you a very comfortable life as a cat, but you can't create much virtue. So you want to make sure that you also practice ethical conduct, which will enable you to have a human rebirth, for example. Yeah. And then when you have that and you have wealth, then you have the, very good conditions for your practice. So those are the principal, generosity as the cause for wealth, ethical conduct, the cause of a good rebirth. Yeah. Now, when you get that good rebirth, okay, then you do need a certain amount of material wherewithal. If you're totally impoverished, it's very difficult to practice. Yeah, because you're just trying to stay alive and get food and shelter and medicine and clothing. So food, shelter, medicine, clothing, those are the cooperative conditions that would enable you to really use your precious human life. Okay, so they aren't the main things, but without them, there's going to be some hindrance in your practice. Other kinds of conditions are, let's say somebody has created ethical conduct, but at the time they're dying, they're in the hospital, and somebody is playing a war movie, a film of a war movie in the room. Okay, so you know war movies, there's violence, there's all this stuff going on. So maybe, you know, that person's dying, but they're looking at the movie. They get distracted by the movie, and they start to think kind of hateful thoughts because of seeing a movie about war. That could then, that person has the principal cause for a good rebirth, but they don't have a good mental state when they're dying. So that principal cause, that seed cannot ripen at that moment because their mind is in a non-virtuous state. Yeah. So that the seed for a good rebirth remains in their mind. Yeah. But it has to wait until another time when the cooperative conditions are good so that it ripens. If we think of gardens, now I know in Singapore, you're not going to think about gardens so much because your main crop here is asphalt. But if you plant a seed, yeah, the seed is like the principal cause, but the plant is not going to grow just from there being a seed. You have to have fertilizer, you have to have water, you have to have the right temperature. Those are all the cooperative conditions. Okay, so for anything to ripen, yeah, it's not just one cause. There's a whole constellation of things that support that cause ripening. Okay, so I often say little things matter. Yeah, because little things can be quite important. Yeah, quite important. Yeah, if you have a child, yeah, and your child is playing with matches, that's not very safe. Yeah, but they're not going to wind up in the ICU for a burned body unless one of those matches catches. Okay, so that match rubbing against something and catching, that would be like a cooperative condition, and then the child might get burned. Yeah, then your second question.
The verse about every destructive I've done since beginningless time.
Yeah.
And the next verse says, rejoice in the inconceivable virtue, but they're inconceivable, so how,
Yeah.
and so my question is as to get to the point, is it to bring up feelings of regret over one bad deed and think of a good deed and rejoice? Or instead of literally have to think of an inconceivable,
Well,
the inconceivable. So
inconceivable, your mind cannot encompass it. Okay, so the idea when it says inconceivable, it means a lot. It's so big that you can't conceive it. It's like if you look up in the sky, do you have any idea of how far away some of those stars are? I mean, it's maybe a scientist can tell you, but for us and the rest of us, it's kind of inconceivable. Yeah, or how a black hole operates. Anybody understand that? You know, not even the scientists. So, you know, there's so many things that are beyond our present ability to understand. Yeah. So, in the one that says inconceivable, that one is talking about rejoicing. No, or yes? Let's see. I rejoice in the countless virtues done by ordinary beings, and the inconceivable virtues accumulated by Aryas. Okay, it means countless. Can you count the virtue of ordinary beings? It's too high of a number. Yeah. Can you count to the end of the number line? Remember math class? Can you count to the number of the number line? No, because there's no end. Okay, so when you hear countless, countless just means you can't count it. Inconceivable means that it's beyond our very limited ability to understand. Okay, now the previous one, where it says, I reveal and confess every destructive action I have done since beginningless time. Beginningless time, that one means time without beginning. Okay, in other words, there was not a time when sentient beings didn't exist. Okay, the idea is, okay, we have a body and we have a mind. Each one has a previous continuum. Our body's continuum is matter, so its previous causes, its previous continuum is matter. When the body dies, the body continues to be in matter. Okay, the worms have a great lunch. Okay, yeah, are you going to be eaten by the worms? Yeah, well, Singapore, maybe they burn. Yeah, so you're not eaten by the worms. You don't have a chance to make offering with your body. Yeah, no, I think it'd be good to make offering of your dead body, maybe some sentient being to, benefit from it. But, our body is burned, then the ash scatters everywhere, okay? But it's still material form. Our consciousness, on the other hand, is not form. It's formless. Yeah. So you can't measure it using scientific instruments. Yeah. And each moment of mind, the substantial cause, the thing that turned into that moment of mind, was the previous moment of mind. And that was the previous moment of mind. And you can trace every moment of mind back until you were born. And then from there, the mind when you were in the womb. And then when you get to the moment of conception, where did that moment of mind come from? Previous life, or the intermediate stage between one life and the next. Okay? And so there's no beginning to our consciousness. So when we say, that we confess everything since beginningless time, it means there's no beginning to our rebirth, and there's no beginning to the things, the misdeeds that we've committed. Yeah. So again, the idea is, when you are generating regret for your misdeeds, don't just think of, well, when I was 4 years old, I hit my brother, and when I was 10 years old, I cheated on a test, and, yesterday I lied to a friend. Think of those things, we did them, we should be responsible. But think of what and who you could have been in a previous life. Yeah? Because they say that since there are infinite previous lives, we've been everything and we've done everything. Yeah? So if that's the case, we've all been incredibly rich, kind people, but we've also been corrupt politicians. And the seeds from all of those things are on our consciousness. So we want to, the seeds from when we were corrupt politicians, or when we were cheating business people or whatever, those seeds are on our mind stream. And unless we purify them, they will ripen into suffering for us. So we're thinking of all those things. We can't say, oh yeah, I remember 50,002 eons ago, yeah, I lied to my mother. No, we can't remember that kind of stuff. But if you think, oh, I've been in samsara since beginning this time, I've probably lied to a lot of people. And I can see this lifetime, there's the tendency sometimes to lie. Yeah, sometimes even big fat lies. Other times, just exaggerations in a story. But there's some tendency there, there's some imprint. And I want to purify that. Yeah, I want to cut that energy so that in the future I don't lie or exaggerate or whatever it is. And so that motivates us to do what's called the four opponent powers, which are the way to purify. Okay, so first one, regret. Then the second one is like making amends to whoever we harmed. So if we stole things from the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, then we take refuge in them to make amends. If we stole things or talked behind the back of sentient beings, we generate bodhicitta to make amends with them. So that's the second of the four. The third is doing some kind of remedial action. So doing the Amitabha meditation, making prostrations, making offerings, meditation practice, all those kinds of things are some kind of remedial behavior. And then the last one is making a decision to avoid doing that action in the future. So some things we can say, I will never do again. We've looked at it, we've done it, we feel so disgusted, we can say very clearly, I will never do that again. Other things, like gossip, can you say that you will never gossip again? Yeah? Can anybody truthfully say they will never gossip again? Nobody wants to look me in the eye. Okay, we can't truly say that. But what we can say is, I aspire not to gossip again. And for the next 2 days, I will not gossip. And then for 2 days, you be really, really careful. Yeah, you get out the duct tape and you put it here and you put it in between your fingers so you can't type it either. Yeah. No, I'm joking. But, you really abandon gossiping. For those 2 days, that was your promise. Okay? Then that gives you some kind of self-confidence. Oh, I can actually avoid gossiping for 2 days. Pat yourself on the back. Okay, I'll try for another 2 days. And in that way, you slowly help yourself develop good habits. Okay, Jason.
Just maybe a clarification. I think one of the previous questions talked about the Amitabha Pure Land ramp.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who aspire to take rebirth in this Pure Land, so this Pure Land is actually beyond the 6th realm of existence.
Yeah. Yeah. And this kind of Pure Land, they say it's the Western Pure Land. Yeah, Western from what? Yeah, you have to know, because East and West, you have to have a point that it's East or West. So I've never heard, maybe it means our planet. Yeah, this tiny little thing. Okay. But you don't get to Amitabha's Pure Land by physically traveling there. Because remember, you've died and you don't have this body anymore. Yeah. And the cause of rebirth there is good ethics, generosity, fortitude, meditation, joyous effort, generating love and compassion, all these virtuous activities. Those are the things that are going to get us to Amitabha's Pure Land. Yeah, you can't get one of the taxis to take you there. Okay, because it's not something physical in our world.
Okay, continue on this question is that I was told that there are many forms of Buddha's Pure Land, right?
Of which Buddha?
Buddha's Pure Land.
Yeah, there's many Pure Lands. Yeah, many Pure Lands.
Certain Buddha's Pure Land may have different entry level or different entry requirement. So since Buddha has compassion for us and is non-judgmental, why there are different entry requirements for different Pure Lands?
I'm going to refer that to the Buddha to answer. Okay. But if you think about it, if each Pure Land has a different environment, that emphasizes certain aspects over other aspects, then, of course, to be reborn there, you're going to want to have some familiarity with that kind of practice. Yeah. Because you're not going to be born in somebody who has never heard of Amitabha or done that practice or anything like that. Yeah. It's going to be difficult for them to be born there because they haven't created the cause. Yeah, and I think most of the causes to be born in different Pure Lands are, generating qualities that are similar to those that are emphasized in that Pure Land. Yeah. So I don't think that, Amitabha sat down and said, okay, let's see, we have countless sentient beings. Who am I going to let be reborn here? Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, first of all, they have to say it. Namo Amitabha 10 million times without taking a breath. Okay, then they have to be nice to other people. Yeah, but really nice, not fake nice. Sincerely nice. Yeah, if they're fake nice, I give them tomorrow. I don't think it's like that. Okay? We are very, very literal, and that literal perspective can make our mind very, very narrow.